I'm Mark Davies, Director for Communities and Environment. My role, amongst other things, is to sort of oversee the delivery of the Council's climate change action plan. So we have an action plan in place which initially focuses on the Council's direct CO2 emissions. So as Erica said, we produce about 3,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide from our services like waste collection, grounds maintenance, our buildings, our leisure centres, etc., which is 0.4% of the CO2 produced in the district, so about 750,000 tonnes produced in the district. Now, even us reducing from our direct emissions by 2030 from 3,000 tonnes to 0 tonnes is a significant challenge. It requires resources, it requires much planning. So the way that we've approached it is to, first of all, assess where our CO2 emissions come from. So as you would expect, probably fairly typical of most organisations, about 37% come from gas usage in buildings, and particularly our sports centre at Saltaire. 40% from our diesel fleet, so we've got about 25 bin wagons, and bin wagons do about 3 miles to the gallon. And then the other 22% comes from electricity use in our buildings. So to get to 0 by 2030, we've got a plan, and the plan is costed. Obviously, as we go into each year's budget, we have to look at how what's happening in this financial year. In terms of gas, we're replacing boilers at Saltaire, at the City Museum, at Williamson Park. That'll require about £750,000 worth of investment. But what we'll get is far more efficient boilers that produce that are a lot more sort of environmentally friendly. So from a business case point of view, that makes sense. In the next financial year, we're replacing 2 of our bin wagons. Each of our 25 bin wagons produces about 30 tonnes of CO2 a year. So if eventually we shift all of our bin wagons to electric or to hydrogen, that gives us 25% of our CO2 savings. So we plan to change to 2 in the next financial year. We're changing 21 of our Lancaster City Council vehicles, transit vans, small vans, the ones that you see sort of driving around, to electric in this financial year. We've already put up a network of charging points, so that's about £1.3 million worth of investments. In terms of electricity, we're in the planning stage of building a solar farm on the former landfill site at Saltaire. So hopefully we'll build that later on this year. That's a cost of about 1.4 million. What that solar farm will do is produce most of the electricity that's needed to operate Saltaire Sports Centre. So again, whilst there's an initial cost there, it generates income of about sort of £90,000 a year. It gives us a 10-year payback period. It means that our electricity prices at Saltaire are constant. So whilst there's that initial investment, again, it represents good business sense. So we planned how to get to 0 by 2030. What we also need to look at are our indirect emissions, so things like our council housing estates, our parks. We're investing in planting lots more trees. We're looking at different ways of managing our parks and open space.
Just got about a minute left, Mark.
But what we also need to do, most importantly, is look at that other 99.6%, which is where obviously you come in, because how do we influence the county council? How do we influence the big institutions in the area? How do we influence agriculture? And most of all, how do we influence every single person who lives in the district to make those big changes that are needed to reduce CO2 emissions and respond to this emergency. So that's why we're really pleased that we're able to sort of engage with the People's Jury on this. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Erica and Mark. Right, so